Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Elizabeth Hoff, and I want to welcome you to today's webinar, which is focusing on EHR integration through demonstration of the Galen Data Cloud Platform. As a reminder, you're all muted today, but I do want you to note on the next few slides some things you may want to know, particularly in the chat side. We will be taking questions at the end of this webinar. Next slide, please, Abbas. As a brief introduction, Galen Data is unique. Our leadership team is comprised of 100 collective years of MedTech experience. We designed our cloud platform by MedTech people and exclusively for MedTech solutions. We have deep expertise in quality management systems, software engineering, global markets, and we understand our customer's customer. We know what your team wants and what we know, and we also know what your hospitals and physicians and patients want. I personally joined Galen's leadership team about 6 months ago, having spent about 35 years in the MedTech cardiovascular space. I spent 8 years at Guidant many years ago and led European sales and marketing. I was in leadership at W.L. Gore, and I've specialized in scaling and launching highly disruptive technologies globally. Most relevant, I spent 5 years as Vice President and General Manager of Medtronic, where I was the first GM over the implantable cardiac diagnostic business unit. It's a very successful product line now. It's called the Link device. When I was at Medtronic, the CareLink back end rolled up under me, and we called it Connected Care at the time, and it was part of the cardiac rhythm division. We had about 800 people dedicated to those back-end systems. So essentially, we had built an entire IT department just to support implantable cardiac devices such as pacemakers and defibrillators. Next slide. I joined Galen because we believe the best way for companies of all sizes to scale and ultimately help patients, investors, and shareholders is to partner your cloud connectivity versus building a large IT company. Your real expertise should remain on your products and your solutions and your customers and not necessarily on the cloud connectivity. Next slide, please. We are working with companies of all sizes and all shapes, including diagnostics and therapeutics, small startups, mid-sized companies, and large strategics. Next slide. For those exploring the question of build versus partner, if you're at that stage of your decision making in your R&D department, I showed this simple slide to demonstrate that yes, you can build your own, such as we did at Medtronic a decade ago. And you can even run on AWS, which Galen Data Platform does run on AWS, but it will not right out of the starting gate have the capabilities of the Galen platform. So in summary, for me, Galen's platform collects and securely stores data, as well as provides tools to visualize and analyze both patient and device data. We maintain and secure the Galen cloud to ensure you meet cybersecurity standards, as well as the ever-increasing FDA and global regulatory compliance. With this, I'd like to introduce Abbas Dhilawala, who's the Chief Technology Officer and Chief Architect and co-founder of Galen Data. Abbas has dedicated his career to software engineering for the MedTech space, with years as part of NASA's Life Science program, and he initially started doing custom cloud connectivity for large companies such as Fresenius, Novartis, Alcon, etc. And then he went on to co-found Galen. Abbas will be our main speaker today, and again, I encourage you to put questions in the chat because we want to make sure that all of you have a chance to get your questions answered. So with that, I'll pass this on to Abbas. Abbas, welcome, and would you mind giving the group here a quick introduction of yourself before we start?
Sure, Elizabeth. As Elizabeth mentioned, I have 20+ years experience in software development, most of that in the medical device kind of life science spaces. Before Galen, I led teams building medical device software, both in cloud and mobile, web, desktop, embedded for many different companies or large companies, as well as small startups. We started Galen Data to kind of make the cloud connectivity out of the box. right? So before Galen existed, there was no real solution that you could use. You had to do the build, and building yourself takes time, money, has a lot of risk, both project risk and product risks, and then you also have to maintain over the long term. There's IT requirements, there's security requirements, privacy requirements that your team has to become an expert in. So what we did with Galen Cloud is essentially package all that expertise that we had developed over the years into a configurable system, and allow the customers to kind of fast track their speed to market. So what is Galen Cloud? Essentially, as I said, it's a configurable cloud platform, but it's purpose-built for medical devices. And what that means is, we design it to be configurable because we understand that devices are different, the workflows are different, needs of patients to interact or needs of clinicians to interact differ from depending on the kind of the device and the modality of deployment. We understand that data is important, so managing and also kind of visualizing that data in meaningful ways is important. So we have that as a part of our platform. Managing devices in the wild. So not only you have the device built, but when you deploy it, if it's in the patient's, if it's a wearable, it's implantable, it's patient's home, or in the clinics, you have to manage that. And with the new regulations now with FDA cybersecurity and stuff, it's becoming more and more important to keep devices up and running and safe. And so things like firmware management, authentication, status, knowing which devices are working, which are not working, ability to get logs from devices, those kind of things are important. Integrating with third-party data stores, a large part of what we talk today is around that aspect, so around the EHR aspect. And then onboarding, so special workflows to onboard patients, clinicians, and partners. Again, configurable workflows, so it works with what your needs are. And then notifications, multi-channel, email, SMS, voice, push notifications, different forms, different flavors, depending on what you really need. But most important, built for medtech, built for medical devices. So we are built under ISO 13485 certified quality management system. So we build a system just like you will build your devices with the same quality requirements, same rigor, and same attention to details. And then we also operate under HIR certified controls. What that means is, HIR is a standard for security and privacy. It includes a bunch of other standards, ISO standards, and requirements like HIPAA and GDPR, and a bunch of other regulations. And it's a very hard certification to get. We have that because we believe, again, in securing and protecting patients' data, your data as well. So the value proposition generally for Galen Cloud, as I mentioned, speed to market is the most important thing. We want to reduce cost and time on average 12x faster. Full compliance, as I mentioned, the compliance is a key differentiator of the platform. Scalable, we understand you're not just in the market for 5 devices or 10 devices, but thousands and millions of devices and patients. So we have a scalable system that can go scale as you scale. Providing you first-in-class, best-in-class support, and then designing responsive UIs so that you can use these systems across a variety of devices, reduce the risk because we have developed this under the right compliance, and we have customers that have now gone through regulatory process using our tools, getting FDA approved, getting CE marked under MDR and under MDD, and some now under MDR, Health Canada, and so on. So we know that our system is trusted from a regulatory perspective. Ease of use as much as we can. We want to make it easy to use system for all different stakeholders. And then personalization, again, we understand that everybody's different. Your needs are unique, your needs are special. So we make sure that we can configure and personalize this to what you need. So that's kind of the idea.
Not to interrupt, but I think that's a really important feature of the Galen Cloud. One, that it's customizable. I mean, it is a platform, but we still can make some customizable features because we know that all of you are different. The question to you, Abbas, too, when you go back and you say speed to getting onto the platform, how long does it typically take you to get a company onto the cloud platform?
Yeah, so getting on may have different meanings. Connecting and transferring data can be done as little as 2 hours. We have actual customers that done that, but getting to a meaningful implementation, which means you have thought through what workflows you need, you have customized it, you've tested some of that stuff. An average, I think it's in a month or two to get everything running. Again, depends on the complexity of your device, depends whether your device is ready, what resources you have, and so on. But 4 to 6 weeks is a good parameter on getting a meaningful integration done.
And your team works closely with those example companies you mentioned.
Yes, we believe in partnership, not in a vendor-customer relationship. It's a partnership. So it means your success is our success. So we want to make sure that we give you the full attention that you deserve and you need, and we, as much as help you need, we are here to provide.
Right.
Thank you. So just high level, I'm not going to go super detailed because I know you're here to look at the EHR stuff, so we'll get there. But high level features of the platform, some of this makes sense in the EHR context as well. So just basic, again, it's built for medtech, built for medtech workflows. So the idea of user practices and third-party partners, management of those things, device and data management, vast variety of authentication options. So both authenticating with the platform, but also using authentication from somewhere else. So if you have a let's say a Microsoft account and you want to use that account instead of our account, you can do that, things like that. Visualization of the data. So it's, not only we get the data, but we allow you to see data in different forms, notifications and events. So as I mentioned, different notification channels in terms of email, SMS, voice, and so on. Ability to create forms and schedule those forms. So if you're doing, let's say, a clinical trial and you want to do a patient intake form or a patient outtake form or a daily or a weekly patient status form, or if you want the provider to fill out forms at certain time frames within the therapy or within your diagnostic workflows, you can do that as well. And again, personalization, customization, ability to change things within the system, but also the ability to extend the system beyond what it has. So we understand, again, we're not going to meet 100% of your requirements all the time. You may have special requirements, and then you can extend the system, or we can extend the system for you so that we meet all of your requirements, but we still have a bulk of that already done, and you don't have to necessarily build everything from scratch.
And Abbas, flexibility of languages, correct?
Yes, so we are designed to support multiple languages. Again, this is a global system, so English is not the only option. Although the demo today will be in English, but we support multiple languages as well. And localization in terms of not just language, but also formats, right? So date formats and the currency formats, and the number formats, essentially localization to global requirements. Just high-level list of things we comply with. So we have certifications, as I mentioned, in ISO 13485 and HITRUST, but we are regularly compliant to FDA, MDD, MDR, Health Canada, Australian TGA, and many more, and then HIPAA, GDPR, and then a bunch of other standards across the globe. We are compliant to, and we add more and more to the list. But this just shows that compliance is a problem because every region, every country comes up with a slightly different way of doing things, slightly different timeframes, nuances on what you can and cannot do. And so what we want to do is take that burden off you as much as we can in terms of us being the compliant, us keeping track of all the regulatory requirements around data localization, data privacy, security, and then we inform you and we work with you to make sure that it gets implemented within your instance. So getting back to the product a little bit, so just I have a high-level architecture because that we need to understand before we get into the EHR aspect of it. So high level, we have the Galen cloud that runs within the cloud. So this has all the feature sets that I just mentioned. These features get exposed over a REST-style web API. This is a modern API structure that is then consumed by devices or apps or whatever software systems you have. These can be as simple as authenticate and send data. It could be all more complex. It could have an onboarding of the patient, onboarding of the physician. So depending again your use case, you may use as little or as much of these APIs as you need. But essentially, you have your devices or your apps that actually generate data or get the data, push that data in, or pull data back out as needed. You may pull firmware files down. You may pull configuration. You may pull therapy setup down, but you also put maybe real-time data into the system. What we also provide is, and you'll see this today, is the web portal, which is essentially a web-based UI that we provide as part of the subscription. Again, it's part of the adaptability is built in the system, so you can use this the web portal on your phone, on your tablet, on your no matter what screen you have. And so that's there. The web portal does two things. It kind of provides a graphical interface over the API, so you're not talking API level directly, and also provides a dashboarding system that is useful in visualization of the system. You can build your own custom UI if needed. We don't necessarily prohibit. We have customers that have done both, that use our web portals for some of the stakeholders and use custom UI for some stakeholders. We understand that, and we can provide templates to get started early. Especially on the web, we can provide templates to get quickly started on those. But what we are going to talk more detail today is this third-party system integration, specifically EHR integration. So building a system and a way of doing things that allow you to take data from the devices, put it in our cloud, analyze it, normalize it, process it, whatever. But at some point, data needs to go to a system that is mostly used by your customers, right? So providers don't want to log in to our system or log in 20 different systems to get data. They want everything in their system, which is, for good or bad, is the EHR. That's the system of record. So the idea is, you will have a lot more data in our system, but some clinically important information may then need to be pushed back to the EHR. Conversely, you may have information in the EHR that you may need to pull to process, like you may need patient history information to do diagnostic algorithms, right? The algorithm may want to take not just the measurements that your device is doing, but I need to know, does the patient have certain conditions? Does the patient have, this kind of medication, things like that. So you can pull that kind of information back from the EHR. This system will allow us to eventually also integrate with laboratory information systems and other systems, but right now we're talking about EHR specifically. So why EHR?
And it just seems, the why I think is really important, but in our conversations with others, they ask specifically what a doctor goes through. A doctor kind of lives in the EHR. Do they have to log in Galen? Do they have to see Galen at all, or do they still live in their EHR?
So with the EHR integration, no, they can stay in EHR at all completely, right? So again, it depends on what they're doing. If we can push data, and I'll show you how to do push data, but we can push data natively into the EHR. That allows the doctor to get access to information, whether that be a report or that could be just discrete data points, right? Say I want to see, asking my patient to do blood pressure every day, and that blood pressure information is in my cloud, and then eventually maybe I just need to see averages over a week. Those averages that can be sent to the EHR. So when I, as a provider, log in to my EHR, whatever that be, Epic, Cerner, or whatever, I can see a measurement once a week or averages per week. So I'm not bombarded by a lot of data because I don't have time. I'm already busy, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm not having to log in. I don't have to open an app. I don't have to do anything. It's there because I have to, my workflow is to always log into the EHR regardless. So that's what the idea here is to make sure it's as simple as possible for the end user, and specifically here, the provider. And because a lot of the EHR systems now also have patients facing interfaces. My chart, for example, on Epic, the patients then eventually can also see that data through the EHR systems. Okay. So why EHR? Why do the integration, right? So obviously we know why. The question is, why is it hard, right? So there's many roadblocks with EHR integration, and some of you already know this, but One is there's just a lot of vendors, depending on your subspecialty that you're targeting. If you are targeting large hospitals, we have generally 3 to 4 vendors, Epic and Cerner being the large kind of players in that space. But then when you go into more small or medium-sized clinics, there's just a huge amount of options there. Some are specialty specific. So if you are in a dental space, you may have a very dental specific EHR. You may have something that in the optic space and other aspects of as well. So wide variety of vendors in the system exists, which means integration is not a single thing you do. Even within a vendor, there is uneven support for interoperability standards. So there's 2 interoperability standards that have widely been used now. One is called HL7. You'll see some references later on. But HL7 was kind of designed, I guess, in mid-90s to interoperate between EHR systems. Its implementation is archaic, but it's there, and it's because it has it was done in the 90s. It has some acceptability, quite a bit of acceptability now in at least the major EHR vendor players. And then the newer standard that came around in the last 7 to 10 years is what's called FHIR, FHIR. It stands for Faster Healthcare Interoperability something, so resource. The FHIR standard is a newer, more easier to work with. Unfortunately, again, the support between large vendors or smaller vendors is uneven. More and more are implementing it, but there's no one way of doing it right now. So which means what you need is you need to customize it for every clinic and every practice, every hospital, and that aspect of it is one of the roadblocks. It's too much work. With the customization of the hospital clinic. As I mentioned, every hospital will also customize the EHR system. So even if I had 2 hospitals that both use Epic version 9, let's say, that doesn't mean that they're exactly the same system. A lot of hospitals, especially large ones, will customize further the system. And that means that they look different, they behave differently. Some of the same fields don't show up in the right screens and so on. So you have to put information in the right place for it to show up in the doctor's workflow. Otherwise, it's going to be hidden in this vast database that they have. Policies, so you have to navigate. There's 2 aspects of this, right? So there's a technical aspect. How do you connect 2 systems that don't talk the same language and then may talk in 20 different languages or 100 different languages? And then once you figure out how to do a Google Translate, for example, of the interoperability mess, then you still have to navigate the bureaucracy of the hospital. It's not like, hey, I have connection here, so let's just do it. It doesn't work that way. You have to go through a security review, you have to have a champion. There's a lot of issues you have to deal with in terms of the hospital and clinic policies. Our system doesn't necessarily take away that, or it takes away the technical aspect of it, and it provides you a starting base to navigate the bureaucracy, and I'll talk about that in a sec. But let's say, so how do we solve it, right? So we have a product called Galen Connect. This is what we're introducing today as part of this webinar. It's a template-based configuration system, so allows us to map your data that's in the system across different standards. So we can say, hey, I can map this data to the FHIR standard, or I can map this data to the HL7 V2 standard, because again, different EHRs may speak different languages. Think of this as a kind of a translate mechanism that takes your data and translates into different format, depending on what the EHR is talking about. It allows us to configure that mapping further down through per hospital clinic. So you may have a master translate, but then there may be dialects, right? So I may translate from English to Spanish, but Spanish in Spain and Spanish in Mexico is slightly different. I need to be able to adapt it to specific clinic or hospital. So through this system, we allow that to very easily do that adaptability between hospital and clinics once you have the master mapping or master translation done. Deployment modality, we understand that because of hospital security policies, there'll be different options available in terms of modality. So whether it be deploy in the cloud, deploy the Galen Connect cloud, so the hospital is okay with that. Most of the time they are. We do secure connections, so that should be fine, but sometimes they say no, everything has to run within our infrastructure. So we can also deploy the Galen Connect at the edge. So we have multiple deployment ability available. And then We can also integrate with existing EHR connectivity partners. Let's say you work with some partners that are already doing the EHR, but your data is here and you don't want to have to build one-to-one connections again. We can work with them and have a transfer of data from us to them, then to the EHR. So this does not exclude away working with someone like Redox, for example, that does this specific thing, right? Because we understand the bureaucracy at the hospital is still complex, and if you want to navigate that with an existing solution, that's fine as well. So that is allowed as that is included in the system as well. So high level, I'll have a couple more slides before I can kind of show you a quick demo of the system. So high level, we have the Galen Cloud. That's where your data is. Then we have the EHR, Epic, CERN, or whatever, and we need to somehow find a translation, somehow move the data in and out. So the way we do it, as I mentioned, Galen Connect. So we have this concept of transformation templates that will transform the data in the Galen Cloud to the EHR, or vice versa, the EHR data into the Galen Cloud. The Galen Connect talks to the same APIs that anybody else can talk to the Galen Cloud. And then on the other side, it can either talk FHIR or HL7 right now, and we're working with other partners to enhance that options. But right now, FHIR and HL7 options are available. What we can bring in from the EHR currently is patient information, so patient history, medical history, any procedures, any kind of history, patient history and information can be brought in. So a lot of the patient workflows start with the EHR. So if I go to a hospital for a procedure, they enter my information, they order a test or set of tests, and they may do certain things. So all that happens in the EHR, we can bring that in to the Galen Cloud so that you can act on it. Let's say you are a software as a medical device, and your diagnostic algorithms are in our system. A prescription from the EHR can be triggered to run the algorithm with that data, and then the report that is generated then can be pushed back to the EHR. So again, the provider logged in the EHR, ordered the test, went away. Few minutes, hours, days, depending on what your turnaround time is, they come back in and there is a report, right? So again, they don't even know the Galen exists. They are really sitting in the EHR. We can also push measurement and observational data, so essentially discrete data. It doesn't have to be actual reports. And then also, in case your workflow starts with the Galen Cloud, let's say this is a patient who buys a device off the shelf or from CVS or Caremark or whatever, and that's how the patient workflow starts. So the patient is within the system, we can push that patient eventually to the EHR. So the hospital that's doing remote monitoring, for example, can have that record in the EHR as well. So one thing I wanted to explain is how can we customize to specific hospitals and practices. So again, we just talked about the Galen Connect. We talked about a base template, right? A base mapping template. This kind of is a major master translation, if you will. This goes from English to Spanish. And then every hospital, I can create a sub translation that maybe overrides certain things from the master translation. Maybe this word is used certain different way here in Spain versus in Mexico. So I can tweak that, and then I can make these mapping for every clinic. But because my master mapping is done before, it's much easier to do that tweaks per hospital system. And then all these mappings are fed into the Galen Connect system. And then you have an EHR. Let's say there's EHR that speaks FHIR. A specific way, so we can do the FHIR conversion of the data and then push that data into the EHR, or vice versa. We can get data from the EHR, do the FHIR conversion, and push it into our system. Let's say there's another EHR that speaks HL7. Same thing. You take the same mapping, but use an HL7 converter, and that basically talks to HL7. Let's say tomorrow there's a new system for which we have no converters. That uses some custom API that's neither FHIR or HL7. Because of the system, the way it's designed, it's very easy to add a custom converter. So we have to obviously develop that, but can be developed very easily, and maybe even can be some of the work we've done with the FHIR and HL7 can be reused here. But the idea is you can develop a custom converter to talk over a custom API. So if there's an EHR that is, has its own API but doesn't speak FHIR or HL7, that can be done. Or as I mentioned, if you want to talk to an EHR connectivity partner, that's fine as well. And we work with couple other good partners and willing to talk to more if it need be. But if you have that connectivity partner already, we can work with them as well. So at this point, I want to maybe switch to a quick demo of kind of how this configuration is done within the system. We have about right. So I'm going to switch.
So essentially, for the companies that are listening to us today, we're going to talk about our cloud platform, which is necessary for the EHR integration. So many companies, we've looked at the attendees list, have no exposure to the Galen platform. So now you're going to switch into the demo of the platform.
Yeah, correct? So I'll give a good. I'll start with a high-level structure, kind of how the system is organized, how it works, just so that those who don't have the context can get it. And even for the EHR context, there's some base knowledge needed. So I'll go there. And let me switch. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in here, and I'm going to log in as an admin, as super admin. But our system is role-based. So depending on your role, you see different things. And this is a demo system. All data is just demo data. There's no real data, no real patient, none of that stuff. So as I log in, the first thing I see is something what we call a dashboard. I'll come to a dashboard in a second, but what I want to start talking about is how do we even set up the data in the system, right? We talked about how devices are different. A heart rate, a heart monitor is going to be different than a therapy for sleep apnea. They're completely different devices, different data, different kind of stuff. So what we do is we have a configurable system within the Galen Cloud that allows you to design or define the schema of the data. So data that's coming from a EKG monitoring device is obviously very different than a vitals monitor. So you can define these schemas per device. So here in this demo system, I have 6 different devices that are listed and developed here. The data schema is developed here. I'm going to look at the vitals just because it's the simplest and easy to explain. Within a device, or when I say device, this is a device type, not an individual unit. This is a model number or a SKU or something like that. For each device, we have what we call a data model. Data model is essentially the repository for data and the schema for that repository. So in this vitals monitor, I have 2 different kinds of data models. One is to capture the data that's coming from this mythical vitals monitor, and then one is to capture data from the patient themselves. So let's look at the vitals data. The data model. So here I have, and I'm setting this up. It's already set up, but if I was setting this up, I would create this data model here, and I would basically create the properties or the data elements within this system, right? So in this particular data model, I have 7 different data items. I have the timestamp when the vital was captured, and I have 6 different vitals: heart rate, SpO2, breath rate, temperature, and then my BP in systolic and diastolic. So I have all these stuff here defined. All I'm defining is a name, the code, the type of the data, so that the system can be intelligent on what to do, what validation to do, where to expose that data in a meaningful way. Easy to add a new data type or new data element. We call them properties. You put a name, you specify the type. There's a wide variety of types that we support, whether it be number, text, images, files, CSVs, location, coordinates, and so on. You can specify validation rules, so you can specify what you can and cannot accept. Other options, and then the important thing is you can control visibility down to every attribute, right? So not only we have record level access control, which is needed. So if I'm a physician and Elizabeth is my patient, I should have access to Elizabeth's record, but not somebody else's. But then as a manufacturer, you can even say, hey, this record here that I have access to is really made of 7 different things, and we only want to use C4 because the 3 other things are not meant for you. So the manufacturer can control what access is available to what kind of role. And this will also imply within the EHR, because if you say that the practice has no access to that particular property, it will not be able to push that information into the EHR and so on. So you can define here, again, I have predefined stuff. Part of what you see here is this enable EHR option. So every data model, we understand that not all data needs to go to the EHR, right? So you may have a lot more data. You may capture data at a higher rate. You may capture logs of devices. You may capture a lot of raw data. clinician doesn't have time to look at everything. They only want meaningful information. So you may process data, you may create clinically relevant information, and only that data needs to then sync with the EHR. So you can basically specify here, hey, this here, because this is vitals, I just want to use this as is, and I want to sync this to the EHR. So what I need to do is create that translation, right? We talk EHRs talk FHIR or HL7 or whatever. We talk English here, I guess. So we need to convert that English to Spanish. So here in my enable EHR, I have what we call mappings. So this is what creates a mapping file. So I can click on add mapping, and I can give it a name, whatever the name is, test mapping here, for example. And then I can pick a mapping protocol. So right now, as I mentioned, we support FHIR and HL7. So let's say FHIR-4. FHIR also, another problem we have with the interoperability standard is there's no one version of a standard. There's multiple versions. So we have 2 standards, and I don't know how many versions of each one to adapt to. So FHIR-4 is essentially means revision 4 or version 4. Let's say I don't want to send everything. I only want to send the timestamp and the heart rate. Maybe that's all. Maybe let's also do the temperature. Those are 3 things that I want to sync to the EHR. So I can come here and say, hey, what's my mapping to FHIR, right? Now, this may seem complicated, but we help you with this because we understand some of this stuff, or our partners understand that, and they help you with that. So in the FHIR protocol, these could be either observation or report. So let's just say observation, because this is a discrete data point. So I'm going to pick all 3 as observation. Obviously, these are vitals. So I'm going to say, hey, this is a vital sign. This is a vital sign as well. This is really more of an observation time, right? This is not a sign, it's just a time of the observation. So I mapped this information that was created by you. You could have named this anything. You could have been named this ABC. Doesn't really matter. We are converting that to a specific type within the EHR. So it's vital sign. And then we have the what's called the LOINC code. These codes are kind of standard codes for certain things. So for heart rate, there's a code in the 8601, I think, or something like that. And then we can this is a lookup database that we can work with and kind of put this code. What this does is it puts it in the right place within the EHR, so that they go to vitals, they know that this value here is the heart rate, right? So it's essentially English to some jargon code translation, but that's what the EHRs understand. So this allows you to create a mapping. You can create multiple mappings. So let's say you want to support not just EHRs that have FHIR, but EHRs that support FHIR and HL7. So I can come here and do the same thing. Pick these 3 things and map it to, and it'll be a really similar mapping because the concepts don't change that much, but you can map it and the codes might be different. So you can create multiple of these mappings for every protocol that you want to support. And this creates a master mapping for our system. And so that's how you can do it per data model, not just per data model, per each property within the system. Now, what happens in our system once you set up the data model and you hook up with our API? So your device talks only one API, which is our API. Data flows happen, right? At this point, we need to do a few things. One, maybe there's processing that happens with the system. So processing can be done through our event system. So if I go here and say, hey, I want to create an event that says whenever data comes in, I want to call a processing routine. So that can be done within our system. Let's say that processing then puts in data here. So you had very raw data, you didn't have heart rate, you had just EKG signals from which you're creating the heart rate. Now the heart rate is available. So when do I sync to my EHR, right? So I can sync right away. So whenever data is created, I can sync, or I say maybe my hospital doesn't want high frequency calls, maybe I do a batch update every hour or every day. So you can create that sync frequency here as well. You can set that up within this mapping. You can override a lot of these stuff at the practice level. So you may say, logically, it makes sense to do batch mapping, but maybe hourly. Maybe you have a clinic that says, hey, no, I don't want to even do that. I want to do it once a day or once every other day. You can override that as well. So again, extensibility or configurability down to the clinic level is important to us. But the other thing we can do within our system, obviously for you, and I understand some of you may not be familiar here, so just want a quick overview of the system as well. is when data is in here, one of the things we do allow you to do is create what we call dashboards, right? So this is a way to visualize the data that is already in the system in different forms. So here I have these six different tabs. Each tab is a dashboard. I can easily add a new tab. I can say, hey, demo, and I can basically create a new dashboard and then add what we call widgets to the system. So I'm going to pick a standard widget here, which is a combo chart. We have multiple widgets. Some of them are available. Some of them are custom, but most of them are available as a part of the platform. So here I can say, hey, I want to see a time series data. So my vitals data, for example, is a time series data. So I can pick, what do I want to see? I want to see heart rate, and I want to see, that's my temperature. One is a bar, one is a line, and I want to pick my time value as my actual stored value, not the cloud value. And then my resolution of the data, I think this is an hourly resolution. So I'm going to pick an hour, and I'm going to pick a range just because the data is old. I'm going to pick a last 1 year. But I can also add additional filters. Say I only want to look at what temperature is, greater than 90. This might be, let's say 85. This is junk data, so it's probably not realistic. So I only want to see stuff that is greater than or equal to 85. So I say confirm, and that creates a chart that I can then share with different stakeholders. So let's say I like this chart. I want to call this, my vitals monitor. And it's here. And let's say I want to then share this. Say this should be a good one for a practice user or administrator to see, and then they will be able to see this dashboard if they log into the Galen cloud. So this is a slightly different functionality. Just wanted to show you as we walk through the Galen cloud demo. The other thing I mentioned is configurability at the practice level, right? So I can go into what we could practice essentially maps to a hospital or clinic. So it's just our terminology. All this terminology is changeable. So if you don't like the word practice, it can be easily changed in the system. It can be called clinic, it can be called hospital, whatever. There's a lot of configurability built into the system. Let's say I'm going to pick our local Methodist, Houston Methodist here. So one of the things is not every hospital or clinic may need EHR, right? So you can at a clinic level enable or disable EHR integration. So I can come here and say enable EHR. In this demo system, I only have set up Epic and Cerner, but we can support more. Essentially, anything that supports FHIR is supportable. But let's say I know Methodist uses Epic, so I'm going to use Epic. Which protocol? These are 3 right now. So let's say FHIR. I can point to the server URL and a username password that a hospital will normally give me. It'll be a special password or special accounts just for this integration. So we can put that integration here. What you don't see here, because the demo system is not set up, is the ability to override specific mappings that we developed into the vitals. So we can go there and say, the ionic code, the lonic code is different, and we can put that code here. Or the frequency is different. We say daily, but this particular hospital wants it hourly or weekly, whatever. We can change that. It's not something I can demonstrate in this demo system right now, but that's something we have available within this EHR integration. Just as a basic aspect of the system, configurability, as I mentioned, is important. Events allow us to create rules, essentially on data or on other things. So let's say on my vitals, whenever I want to, whenever my heart rate falls below 65, I don't know if that's alive, but let's say it falls below 65 and I want to do an email notification to the patient, I can do it here. I can just say, hey, owner essentially means who owns that data. So in this case, it'll be the patient, and I can say to that patient, send an email saying, low heart rate. Or send a text or whatever. You can do multiple as well. So you can come in and say, hey, I also want to do a voice call, so we can actually call the number that the patient has provided and leave a message as well. Or I can do SMS, or I can, if your system supports push notification, I can even do push notification through the system. We can also do report generation. So let's say you have I think I have an example here. let's say this is a blood test example. So it's a standard CBC complete blood count report. So data comes in from the laboratory equipment, comes in here, and then I have a template here that I can set up with placeholders that get changed when data comes in, and then the report gets generated, and that report can then be pushed back to the provider or through the EHR. So you're not sending them CBC raw values, you're sending them a report, or you're sending raw values and the report to the provider through the EHR. So that's kind of the system that's built, and a lot of functionality available. I'm not writing any code right now. I'm not doing anything. I'm just configuring system to various different use cases.
Abbas, what about big files, images, DICOM?
Yeah, we support large files as well. So DICOM is one good example. So here I have a DICOM viewer set up with this. I only have 3 files in this case, but these are actual DICOM files, anonymized, but they are actual DICOM files. We support both single frame, multi-frame. So this is a multi-frame, which means I can run it and kind of goes in a loop and stuff like that, and I can navigate back and forth on these things. So that we support. EKG is another example of high frequency data. So here I have an EKG viewer. I have 2 EKG recordings, one for Dave, made up names, patient Dave and patient Marge. If I high frequency, this is a very low frequency, but it's a high frequency one. If I click on view chart here, I can kind of see the EKG data. I can kind of zoom in, zoom out. So I can kind of navigate the EKG. You see some of the markers here. So it automatically creates some of the markers like peak to peak, interval, min and max value. We have partnered with an analysis company that implements that behind the scenes. So when you upload EKG data, those markers can be automatically added to your data elements, and then that allows, and there can be more markers. These are just example markers, but then there can be even custom markers that you may want for EKG.
Right. Abbas, can I ask a question that came in? I think it's really good. It said, can I define new schemas for devices that may be very novel or something which may not have been used in the medical context? As a simple example, something like a smartphone.
Yes, so in our system, you can define schemas essentially for anything. So we have most of our customers build novel devices. So those are devices that may not be that may have schema that is not not known. A lot of what we see is devices collecting a lot of data, a lot of raw data, and then processing or doing post processing. But that raw data is very, very unique to every devices. So yeah, absolutely in our system, when pushing to the EHR, however, we have to work within what the EHR can support. Most EHR systems have essentially a bin to put other kind of data that is not structurally defined. But those things are then hard to bring up in the right flow. So if you translate to some new metrics, let's say you have I will give an example of a customer of ours. They developed a balance score. A balance score measures the balance of a person, how likely they are to fall, especially in the elderly. That balance score is not something that most EHRs will have. So that's a custom thing that the EHR has to do. But once it's done in the EHR, we can map it to that particular field so that when the balance is recorded on the scale, again, they do a lot of AI to design that, to determine the balance, a lot of raw data. The AI calculates the balance score, and then the balance score is what goes into the EHR.
And Abbas, in that example, there was another question about, in our experience working with a lot of different companies, they're talking to the hospital, but who are the ideal stakeholders at the hospital to work with about integration with EHR? Like, what have you experienced and what have our customers?
Yeah. So well, there's some common, but also varies based on the hospital policies and what approval processes you need. But you all have to start with a champion, and the champion is generally a physician. that needs that data or that device into the hospital setup and needs that data into EHR. So you always want to have a physician champion, but then you work with different folks within the hospital system. You may work with IT, you may work with patient safety, or data safety of data, like privacy people. You may work with kind of onboarding specialist, and a lot of times, especially on large hospital systems, you also have the EHR consultants in there. So like Epic may have its own set of people assigned to that hospital if it's an Epic EHR. So you end up working with a wide group of people, and depends on the hospital policies.
That's great. Here's another question that came in. I'm a startup company. In terms of a product roadmap, when's the best time to start an EHR conversation with Galen? And how much funding should be set aside for a pilot?
Okay, interesting question. So from a time perspective, I think you always want to know what integration you need to do, even if you don't do it right away. So you want to understand what data because part of building any device or any system is to understand all the workflows, right? All the stakeholder workflows. So when you design a system and define a data mechanism of capturing data, you want to be cognizant of what a provider needs to see, what a patient needs to see, maybe what the administrators, not just the provider, but the hospital administrators need to see, and maybe insurers and so on. So you need to at least understand what their workflows would be, how they will interact with the data. Even if that's not in version 1, you have that mapping done essentially in your head, so that when you get to that EHR integration phase, the data schema is there, the data is already in the Galen cloud, and then now it's just a point of actually doing the integration. As far as funding, again, it depends on how good your champion is and how that works. It'll be a case-by-case basis, and we'll have to understand a little bit more your requirements to kind of give you an idea. If you're working directly with us, you're working with a partner, are you also what the hospital needs are, what's the volume look like? It's just a lot of variables in terms of funding.
Okay, that's great. Here's another question. We're a mid-sized company already in the US. We want to expand to EU and China. Can you help with that? And how would it work with our US data versus launching in those other countries?
Sure. So let me take the EU because that's a little easier one. So globally, we do regional deployments as needed. So we understand the privacy and regulatory requirements in terms of data localization exist, and more countries are now creating laws and structures where you may have to either keep the data locally, or you are only allowed to export it to a certain jurisdictions. So what we do is we work with you. We work with you, and we have global deployment today. We have customers all over the world. For Europe, for example, we have a European installation. So all our European customers or customers that sell into Europe can use that and keep the data there. Europe, because of GDPR kind of prominence in terms of the framework and the protection it provides, a lot of countries are also allowing GDPR countries to be the destination. So, for example, Israel, if you're in Israel, you can push data of Israeli citizens into Europe, but not necessarily in the US. Well, there's exceptions, but in general you can, and so you can use a European installation there. But in general, we go where you need us to go. China is slightly different because for China, we can't just go directly. We have to work with a third party to be able to go to China, and that's something we are working as well with one of our customers, trying to launch a Chinese installation. But that's a work in progress, and part of this is learning the Chinese environment. But everywhere else, Australia, Southeast Asia, India, Middle East, Latin America, Africa, Europe, not necessarily an issue.
Okay. Great, Abbas. Here's a good question too. We're a large company and we're fighting for budget constantly about supporting our devices. We're considering going out for an RFP. We haven't really decided. Should we talk to you, and what's your guess within the cardiovascular realm of the features that you might have versus what we currently do?
Wow. So yes, you should talk to us because I think we could provide you a solution that is more time efficient and cost efficient. And again, part of what we offer is, again, we're not offering just a tool, we're offering a service. So it's tools plus we manage the service, right? So one of the things maybe not clear is we manage the hosting, we manage the cybersecurity, the backups, the restoration in case of failovers, all the regulatory kind of things we need to do in terms of notifications and stuff like that. So a lot of those things we manage. So yes, I think if you are if you're interested, definitely talk with us. We can definitely give you a great solution for what your needs. As far as cardiovascular, so part of what we have, I just showed you the EKG dashboard here. Again, I don't know what exactly the requirements are. We'll have to see that. But in general, we have some cardiovascular companies already on our platform that use EKG, that use other capture mechanisms, just discrete data. And do analysis on our platform. So definitely a good fit. I'll encourage you to contact us.
Yeah, we've seen some customers that have estimated that it's a 30% reduction in their R&D to use the Galen platform.
It can be as much as 70%, depends on alignment. So we've seen up to 70% in many cases.
Here's a great question. What types of HL7 messaging, parens, ADT, SIU, ORM, ORU, et cetera, is supported for HL7 version 2, and what types of outputs back to the EHR are supported? Custom ORU with a link back to your app, encapsulated PDF, et cetera.
Yeah, so we do support ADT messages right now. So ADT, for those who don't know, is an admission, discharge, and transfer message. So anytime you go to hospital, there's admission. When you're done, there's a discharge. Sometimes they transfer you from bed to bed. So those are transfer messages that allows you to know when a patient checks in, where they are, those kind of things. So we do support ADT, listening on ADT messages, so we know a patient is there. So if you have a procedure scheduled, the ADT message will let us know that this patient has checked in and the procedure can begin. You also let us know that if you have a device that's located at a specific bed, let's say there's 4 units in the hospital at 4 different bedside, we know that this patient went to this bed, right? So we know that this is the device that patient has. What it does is it allows us to, without any other other entry that the nurse or the physician has to make, we can know that this data coming from this device at that point in time is for this patient. So that's kind of an ADT message. We do support that. We do support ORM and ORX messages right now. Maybe I need to get my team. I can give you a better answer with my team, but I think ORM, ORX messages, which are essentially records for observations, we support. We support both native transfer as well as PDF or any binary file transfer, and not just a link to the app, but actual transfer to the EHR.
Right. Abbas, this is a great question as the final one, but could you flip back to our email just so people can note that while you answer this, so that if they have follow-up questions, they can send. So Abbas, really good one. We are a startup that's completely built on AWS infrastructure and their services. What would be the lift to migrate to Galen Cloud and for a similar operation need? How comparable or different would the cost on Galen compared to AWS? And do we have any comparisons?
Yeah, so there's a lot of questions. So the lift will depend on many things. It depends on the architecture. We've actually had a customer that did that, and that because they had architected the right way, the migration was pretty straightforward. But it's some lift. I don't want to make it sound very simple. There's some left, obviously, but it also depends on the architecture. Some may be easier than others. We have to kind of understand what you're doing to kind of give you an idea. We leverage AWS, so we have similar functionality exposed to our API that internally are using AWS backend. So storage, for example, on large file storage on S3, or the databases or messaging, those kind of things are exposed through our API. We can also, if you have an algorithm or if you have some routines already running, we can take those over and kind of as is and push it into our network, so we can do all the cybersecurity and stuff like that. And so we come up with a plan. We understand your requirements, understand your current system, understand what you need and come up with a plan, and that depending on your architecture and stuff, it could be straightforward, it could be some work. Overall, though, you migrate not necessarily for the technology, you migrate for the lack of having to maintain that, not needing to maintain that system forever. So that's kind of what we provide, is taking away the work that you will need to do forever, or the life of your product, which in medtech can be, years, depending on your devices.
Yeah, Abbas, I think that's important to punch up, that it's not necessarily the startup cost, it's the maintenance, and it's
the
hiring
maintenance and the expertise. And so again, we are expert in this. We're not expert in building the widget, right? That's what you do. If we were trying to build a widget, we'll horribly fail maybe. But what we do is manage the back end. We have on staff the security people, the IT people, the data analysis people, those kind of things, that and the privacy and all that expertise is what we have developed. And that's where you do this. So there might be cost to migrate, but you have to balance that against the long-term cost of maintaining the system and the people that you need to hire to maintain or outsource those kind of things.
I would say that it's fairly simple to start up, but over time, as a leader of R&D or as a CEO, what you're constantly going to be fighting for is headcount for supportive functions versus people who are driving your product forward. So I think if you're a leader of your organization, don't necessarily think about your startup costs, but you will almost always get trumped on people who are adding value out in the marketplace and on product people. And you're going to be catch up on the people supporting your cloud. And that's where, with the increased FDA regulation, global regulation, cybersecurity, there's almost no room to fail anymore. It's not accepted by global regulatory agencies anymore to not be prudent on that. And you're always going to fight for budget for building that group. Abbas, any parting words before we end with the group?
Yes, hopefully this was useful. I know it was short time frame, so if you have more questions on EHR or Galen Cloud in general, feel free to reach out. There's a typo here. We've been said that we don't have typos, but there's a typo here. It says hello@galendata.com, or you can reach out on LinkedIn to me or Elizabeth, and we'll definitely respond. But what I want to say is, cloud and EHR are complicated systems. And so if you have those needs, definitely talk to us and see if we can provide you a solution for life.
Great. So I'll just close. Thank you very much for joining. It is hello@galendata.com. If you want to send a personal email, my name's a little bit easier to spell than Abbas's, and it's elizabeth.hoff, Hoff, @galendata.com. Not just Galen, galendata.com. We'd welcome any questions. Email us anytime, and we hope that we can save you money and get you up and running as fast as possible. So thank you all very much. Have a good day.
Thank you.